Everybody, the Simple Handicap for Wednesday, October 23rd. Thank you for making me a part of your morning. It is Wednesday morning. That means the Week 8 live stream preview will go live at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern Time. Hope you can join over on the RAS Picks YouTube channel. If you're already watching on YouTube, the live stream will go live at 9 a.m. Pacific. If you're on Apple or Spotify, would love to have you come over. Last week was a record show. 9,250 bettors tuned in and watched it. The live chat was booming. The comments were booming. Great to have so many folks jumping over to the live stream and participating in the live chat and joining the community that has been built around the show. So I hope to see you there this morning at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern Time. Let's get to the market rundown and get you on your way this Wednesday morning. It was a busy Tuesday, and that's not an overstatement. I like to say things are busy. They're always busy. It's football season. We got a lot to talk about. And it starts on Thursday night. Minnesota on the road at the LA Rams. 3 minus 102 at Chris, 3 even money at Circa, 3 minus 10 at Buckeye. It's 3 minus 105 to even money everywhere else across the board. The total is still 48. TJ Hawkinson trending towards playing for the Vikings. Cooper Kupp almost certainly playing for the Rams. More on him in a second. Puka Nacua was back at practice. I'd be blown away if he plays in this game. There's now the trade rumors that are swirling around the Rams. I don't make much of the Stafford to Vikings rumor. I could be very wrong. I'm looking at this tweet that comes from an aggregate account. That's a tongue twister on a Wednesday morning. Anytime that there's an aggregate account that throws it out there as the first source and there's nothing tied to it, very tough to make heads or tails of it. In terms of the Cooper Kupp rumor, I think there is validity to that one because it was multiple sources that were legitimate reporting that the Rams were the team making calls, willing to take on some of his salary, and they were looking for a second-round pick. Cooper Kupp was asked about it yesterday afternoon. He said he's going to be where his feet are. He didn't downplay it. He didn't deny it. It sounds like there is something brewing there. I find that peculiar, another tongue twister I'm forcing myself into, because the Rams, if they win this game, are at worst one game out of first place in their division. Why do this now? I get the deadline is coming, and perhaps there's injury concerns behind the scenes that are more debilitating than we know or being led on to understand, that they see Kupp as being a long-term problem health-wise with the team. If they're trying to get as much as they can for him now, great, but it seems like just the wrong time to be doing it. We'll see how that plays out. I don't know if it signals quit from the team. I don't know if it signals trying to avoid health concerns. It just seems like the wrong time to be doing this given the state of the NFC West. But it's come out, and the impact it might have on this game is a little bit hard to understand and hard to get to. Tennessee on the road at the Detroit Lions. Lions 11.5-point favorites with a total in this game of 45.5. And before I jump into this, something else I want to touch on. There was a comment on yesterday's video that said the Rams were 3.5. There was plenty of 3.5 out there. At Chris on Monday early, 3.5 was available for 1 minute and 33 seconds. So this has been a very competitive 3, which is why I referenced it as such yesterday on the podcast. Anytime it's been 3-1-20, we've seen dog money. Anytime it's got near 3 even money, we've seen favorite money. And there's been a bit of a back and forth on the key number of 3. So that's why I spoke about the game in the way that I did. Tennessee on the road at Detroit. As mentioned, it is an 11.5-point spread for Detroit from left to right across the screen. There was some bouncing around a little bit with the suspension of Jameson Williams and his impact on the Lions offense, because this is going to be a game where they're likely airing it out a little bit against this Titans defense, especially if L'Jarius Sneed is unable to play. I think his injury status in this game is going to be very impactful, given the suspension on the Lions side with Williams having a breakout career season. And so I'm watching that injury report pretty intently. This is the biggest point spread that the Lions have laid in the Campbell tenure. It's also the 4th time where they have laid more than a touchdown in a game. And what I find interesting looking back on these games is the Lions should have lost 3 of those 4 games straight up. They had a very fortunate comeback in the final 4 minutes a year ago against the Bears. Otherwise, they would have been 1-3. The 3 games where they underperformed and did not cover came immediately after a high-scoring, back-and-forth, emotional win the week prior. And so perhaps it's something with Campbell and how emotional he gets in these spots where the Lions have a big game that's very competitive, that is very high scoring. The next week when they're laying the big number, they haven't been able to overcome it in the Campbell tenure. The one time that they did, they had a blowout win the week prior where they were up 4 scores in the third quarter. The next week they played Carolina and beat them up comfortably. And so can they overcome a spot where traditionally the last couple of years in Campbell, they haven't been in much, but they have not been able to overcome and stay stable emotionally. And now this is, of course, the biggest number they have laid under the head coach. Baltimore on the road at the Cleveland Browns. The Ravens a 9-point favorite across the board with a total of 44. It is officially a Jameis Winston start for the Browns. Bailey Zappi was added early morning yesterday as DTR is dealing with the finger injury that is not labeled to be serious, but is clearly impacting his performance overall. When I look at this game and just trying to figure out the point spread and where we're at, the Winston upgrade, I think, is unanimously accepted as being true. Baltimore closed -2.5 at Cincinnati. Cleveland closed +5.5 at home to Cincinnati. You think about the differences in what that implies. It would make Baltimore somewhere around -3.5 on a neutral. It would make Cleveland somewhere around +6.5 on a neutral. You get to 10 based on recent closing lines, perhaps 10.5. We're now down to a soft 9. If you want to say that Winston's 2-point upgrade, you're getting to this 8.5, 9 window. I think that that's fair. I think that that makes sense. There's a bigger question here, given the Browns' downgrade after shipping off Amari Cooper, which we saw was a 1.5, to factor into consideration in these numbers. Chubb is going to take on more of a workload. Schwartz has played Lamar tough in the 2 meetings last year. But this is a very different Ravens offense that is clearly the best offense in football so far through 7 weeks. And so there's a lot of moving parts to this game. But in terms of the number and the upgrade, perhaps we see a little bit more Cleveland money come in, given the health of their O-line and Chubb taking on more of the role out of the backfield and the Winston upgrade being perceived differently from perhaps different bettors or groups. But I think we're close to where this probably should be in this spot, given the Cleveland 1-6 record and trying to figure out what motivation lies with this team, who, by the way, went to demote Jameis Winston a week ago. And so what was that about as well? Green Bay on the road at the Jacksonville Jags. Packers 4.5-point favorites across the board. Total in this game settled now at 49.5. No 50s showing on the screen. Indianapolis on the road at the Houston Texans. Seeing the first 5.5s showing on the board at FanDuel. Seeing one at Chris as well. Total in this game from 48.5 down to 46. Nico Collins obviously not going to be playing in this game. I think that impact is massive. I've talked with a couple other bettors. They're thinking the same. You look at Collins' performance specifically against the Colts and the zone defense, 6 for 117, 9 for 195, and 7 for 156. DeForest Buckner has a real chance to come back for the Colts in this game. And that would make things a lot tougher for Joe Mixon, who's been the savior for this offense so far this season in the games that he has been healthy for and playing. I know a pro that took Indy at +6.5. Haven't seen a whole lot more one way or another in this game. Arizona on the road at the Miami Dolphins. Dolphins 3 -20. Total from 49 down to 46. Arizona gets the last-second field goal win against the Chargers on Monday Night Football. And we don't see much of an adjustment, if any at all, on this number. As I'm looking at this and trying to go back and figure out what's going on with Tua, I found a medical document that was published in Chapel Hill. I was going way out of bounds on this one. It did a study on a handful of quarterbacks in their return. The average drop was 10 to 20 QBR points and 1.0 yards per attempt. Tua only has returned in season from 1 concussion. In that game, his QBR was 23 points lower than the season average that he finished with per game. When I start to look at this number, aggregate ratings last week, which obviously would not account for Tua being in, made this game Arizona -3.4 on a neutral. The move in the Seattle week after the Tua injury was right around 6.5 points. So if we think about 3.5 points for Arizona, getting to 3 here with home field advantage being priced in. We're at a spot where this is kind of middling preseason expectations for this number, which obviously would have accounted for a healthy Dolphins roster, would have made this game, I looked at 3 sources, between 6 and 8.5. We're at an expensive 3. There's a difference of an opinion in the market not knowing how to value the potential dip in performance that we get from Tua returning compared with where these teams would have been roster at full health-wise comparison. And I wonder if it's not enough adjustment for Miami in this spot, considering they have everyone healthy on offense and all the weapons are going to be there. And Arizona lost another starting defensive player in that game against the Chargers. And really the big question mark is, what do you get out of Tua in this game? And I think nobody really has the true answer to that question. Atlanta on the road at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. What a blow for Tampa Bay. My goodness. We're looking at the Falcons 2.5-point favorites across the board with a total of 46, down from 49.5. It's been Atlanta money in the adjustment so far. The Buccaneers lose Godwin. They lose Evans. It is viewed as a 4-point move relative to where we were in the first meeting between these two teams on October 3rd to where we are now, taking away the home field advantage from those lines as well. That is a big downgrade for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but it is going to be tough to reproduce any level of that production without wide receiver 1 and 2, who've combined for 911 yards and 11 touchdowns. The next highest wide receiver on the Buccaneers roster has 93 total yards. So, I mean, it is a huge void to fill for the Buccaneers in this game. And we're seeing a pretty big adjustment, as big as you're really ever going to see, for losing 2 skill players, which are not a quarterback. Chicago on the road at the Washington Commanders. The Bears a 1.5-point favorite across the board with a total of 44. Unclear if it's a Jaden Daniels or Marcus Mariota game. At this point, Daniels still with the week-to-week designation. Perhaps a sign that Daniels could have a chance to play in this game, as there was a release from a pro last night around 5:30 p.m. Pacific time, and we saw Washington money line get sent out, and we saw the number react across the board. So waiting to see the official status on what we're going to get with the week-to-week designation. Estimation makes it a Mariota game. Could be Daniel starting in this spot. We'll have to wait and see what comes out of it. New York Jets on the road at the New England Patriots. Jets 7.5 minus 103 at Chris. 7 flat or minus 15 everywhere else across the screen this morning. Total in this game from 38.5 up to 42. When looking at this game, just a bit of like commentary that's coming out. Rodgers saying the energy from the team is down. They came out flat against the Steelers. Of course, the Jets taking on more criticism. The Pats calling out on defense was Gerard Mayo saying his defense was soft. That has not sat well for the last 2 days. The total, what interested me the most, from 39 in the first meeting, now up to 42. I think that's a fair adjustment for Drake May and the improved offense. From an injury standpoint, the big thing to watch with this game is the 4 defensive starters in the secondary for the New York Jets. Anybody not named Sauce Gardner is at risk of missing this game. And with those guys not on the field against the Steelers, it looked considerably worse than what we've seen from a healthy Jets secondary. Keep an eye on those injuries today as we get the practice report a little bit later this morning. Buffalo on the road at the Seattle Seahawks, 3 minus 20, the number across the board with the total of 47. Big name to watch here is DK Metcalf. It's going to be a big impact on this game and what his status is going to be. New Orleans on the road at the LA Chargers. Potentially a number of guys returning for the Saints. We saw the Saints have a tweet that came from Nick Underhill, and he was saying in this spot, there is the chance for New Orleans to get back Hill, Olave, Ruiz, and Patrick. If all 4 of those guys play, it's a multi-point upgrade for the Saints. They desperately need help on offense. These guys would provide a massive boost. The Chargers could also get back Chark and Johnston at the wide receiver position. They went for 6.2 and 395 yards with Disley, Palmer, and Fehoko. They were leading the way in terms of targets and production. And if this is now wide receiver 1 and 2 coming back, with Herbert throwing 34 and 39 times, Roman wants him throwing more. He looks great now that he's healthy. You get a big offensive boost on both sides. This is also a maximum versus minimum rest spot. We talked about this on the podcast for the Bucs and Saints a couple of weeks ago. These games have gone over 72% of the time in the database that goes back to 1990, 33, 13, and 2. And this is a total that's sitting short at 40 and has been bet under. And so this is a game in that rest spot that tends to fly over. Philadelphia on the road at the Cincinnati Bengals. Very little line movement in this game. 48 remains the total at most books, but shaded under to 47.5. This is a noisy game, one we'll really dive into on the live stream preview. But both teams, despite being in different conferences, have the same common opponent the last 2 weeks. Both teams have played Cleveland and the Giants. Cincinnati closed -4 at the Giants. Philly closed -3 at the Giants. Difference of 1 point. You have home field advantage. You're getting to right at where the numbers should be. And when you're looking at Cincinnati closing 5.5 at Cleveland, Philly closing 9.5 home to Cleveland, you get right to that same mark of what we're looking at in this game. So the closing lines from recent weeks get you to right where this number is. The question I have from a total perspective, how much of both of these teams playing unders the last 2 weeks was because of their offenses, or was it driven by the opposing quarterbacks, Daniel Jones and Deshaun Watson, who made these teams look more like unders the last 2 weeks than they potentially could be with overs? We'll see. Lots to talk about in this game we'll get to on the live stream preview and again here on the podcast as the week goes on. Kansas City on the road at the Las Vegas Raiders. Chiefs 10-point favorites across the board with a total as low as 41 at Chris. Rest of the market is higher. Pretty good indication of where this total is going to be headed. Kansas City will be without Juju Smith-Schuster for this game as he continues to deal with the hamstring injury. Lots of subjective angles on this game that are swirling around as you have the Raiders with the Kermit incident, with last year's Christmas, post-game tweets and celebrations in Arrowhead with Pierce encouraging trash talking and smoking. All of that is making the rounds again on social media. Lots to think about. Looking at this game, there has been one release that I've seen on the Raiders. Otherwise, it's been all Chiefs money so far to date. Carolina on the road at the Denver Broncos. The Broncos continue to get bet and continue to take money. They're out to 9.5-point favorites. The biggest point spread that Denver has laid prior to this in the Sean Payton tenure was 3.5 points last year against the Chargers with Easton Stick and without Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. Now they're laying 9.5, nearly a full touchdown higher. It is a massive role change in this spot for the Denver Broncos. No quarterback and offense combination has been worse so far this season. That includes Carolina, that includes Cleveland, that includes Tennessee. Denver has been the worst offense and QB combo in neutral game states where it's between 30 and 70% win probability. Now they're laying 9.5 at home against the Panthers. Andy Dalton gets in a car crash. He can't make this up. Gets in a car crash. Thankfully, he and the family and the dog, they're all okay. What impact does that have on this game? Twitter doctors speculating none because nobody needed an ambulance or any medical attention professionally. Dalton went in to get checked by team doctors. Seems like a non-impact. I don't know, but it's just another thing that pops up. Yesterday, in terms of things popping up, Dave Canales has an interview that gets published and retweeted. He was talking about how he needs to simplify things for the wide receivers because they are feeling overwhelmed. And this was in comments for the Washington game against one of the worst defenses in the NFL. If you're overwhelmed against the Commanders defense, and now you're going on the road to play in Denver, where Patrick Surtain is going to be back, and the blitz rate that Denver throws at you, that's certainly going to be overwhelming, isn't it? And so, what a weird comment to have come out. So that's ugly for the Panthers, and the Broncos continue getting bet into numbers I don't think anybody ever imagined they would get into. Dallas on the road at San Francisco. This number continues to crash, but it's hard to do anything because Look, for the 49ers, Ayuk is gone for the season. Terrible loss. Debo is in the hospital with pneumonia and liquid in his lungs. Jennings is unclear if he's going to be able to play. Shanahan wants him to play. I don't know if he's healthy. And now Kittle has a sprained foot. There are so many injuries. If Debo, Ayuk we know will be out, but if Debo, Jennings, and Kittle miss this game somehow, with Ayuk already out, I mean, this has to be a 4 to 5 point downgrade. If Evans and Godwin were getting a 4-point adjustment, I mean, now you're having Jacob Cowing as wide receiver number 1. I mean, it's got to be a massive drop. Aggregate ratings last week made this San Francisco minus 5.3 on a neutral. This number is now San Francisco minus 4 and trending lower. So it's all dependent on injuries. And there's injuries for the Cowboys too that we don't know about because they're out of the bye. What are we going to get from Bland, Parsons, and Kendricks? Lots to figure out here. Hard to take a stance, but it's certainly been one-way money on Dallas so far this week. And then in Monday Night Football, it's the Giants on the road at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Steelers minus 6.5 with 1-7 showing at Chris this morning, minus 101. Largest point spread in the Mike Tomlin tenure post Ben Roethlisberger. They've never laid this high of a point spread since Ben Roethlisberger has retired. 2 times they laid more than 4 points. They lost both of those games outright at home. This is a very different role for the Pittsburgh Steelers. It has been an adjustment up from the look ahead of minus 4 to now as high as minus 7 at Chris. And I just question, do the Steelers deserve it after falling behind 15-6 to the Jets and getting every bounce going their way, in addition to the Jets losing cornerback 2, free safety 1, strong safety 1, and cornerback 3 in game during that game. Now, the big injury concern is Andrew Thomas for the Giants, who was lost last week. They're desperately trying to sign somebody. They're interviewing potential candidates. They know it's a big issue. All of the film study and tape commentary that came back about the Eagles game said, look, this is a massive issue at left tackle. So Pittsburgh could absolutely destroy the Giants' offensive line on the left side if they don't end up finding a replacement for Thomas. You're not going to replace the full talent that he has, but the Giants right now do not have a tackle answer at the left tackle position. And that's a big problem and certainly a big advantage that the Steelers could exploit. But this is a very big change in role for the Pittsburgh Steelers, laying a number they have not in the Mike Tomlin era post Ben Roethlisberger. That will do it for me this morning. Have a fantastic Wednesday, everybody. I hope to see you on the live stream preview, 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, on the RAS Picks YouTube channel. If you can't make it, you'll be able to listen back to it on the YouTube channel. I'll have this week's up on the podcast feed as well. And if not, appreciate all your time, and we'll see you back here bright and early on the podcast feed tomorrow morning.